Winter storms are supposed to be beautiful. Quiet snow, empty roads, peaceful silence. But when a blizzard traps you, that silence turns into something else. Because when the world is buried in snow, help can't reach you, and whatever is out there knows it. These are 4 disturbing true winter horror stories from people who were caught in blizzards and realized too late they weren't alone. This happened in northern Minnesota during a whiteout blizzard in January. A man named Eric was driving home from a late shift when the storm hit harder than expected. Within minutes, the road disappeared. Snow covered everything. His phone had no signal. When his car slid into a ditch, the engine died. The wind was screaming outside. Temperatures were dropping fast. Eric saw a faint light through the snow, an old wooden cabin about 50 yards away. With no other choice, he walked toward it. The door was unlocked. Inside, the cabin was empty but warm, like someone had recently been there. A fireplace still had glowing embers. 2 mugs sat on a table. Eric locked the door and waited. That's when he heard knocking, slow, heavy, from outside. He froze. No footprints appeared beneath the window, only untouched snow. The knocking came again, louder this time. Then a voice whispered through the door, "Let me in! It's freezing!" The voice sounded wrong. Too calm, too close. Eric stayed silent. The knocking stopped. Minutes passed. Then the voice came again, but this time it was inside the cabin, right behind him. He turned and saw wet footprints forming on the wooden floor, leading toward him. But nothing was making them. Eric ran. He burst through the back door and didn't stop until he collapsed in the snow. Rescue teams found him at dawn, nearly frozen to death. When they checked the cabin later, it didn't exist. In Wyoming, a massive blizzard shut down Interstate 80, trapping hundreds of drivers overnight. One of them was a college student named Rachel. She was stuck in her car for hours, surrounded by white darkness and abandoned vehicles. The wind rocked her car violently. She wrapped herself in blankets and tried to sleep. Sometime after midnight, she heard footsteps crunching through the snow. A shadow passed her headlights. Someone knocked on her window. A man stood outside. No winter gear, no coat, no gloves. His skin looked pale, almost gray. He smiled and asked, "Can you open the door? My car broke down." Rachel noticed something terrifying. There were no footprints behind him. She shook her head. "No." The man's smile dropped instantly. His face twisted into something unnatural, and he leaned close to the glass. "I wasn't asking." Rachel screamed and honked her horn non-stop. The man stepped back into the blizzard and vanished. State troopers arrived hours later. Rachel told them everything. One officer went pale. He said during blizzards, people often report seeing figures that shouldn't be alive anymore. Lost travelers who froze to death decades ago, still trying to get warm. In rural Alaska, 2 brothers went snowmobiling during early winter. A storm rolled in faster than expected. They barely made it to an emergency cabin used by hunters. Inside, the cabin was pitch black and ice cold. But something was wrong. There were fresh handprints on the frosted windows, from the inside. They heard breathing. Not theirs. Slow, heavy, coming from the corner of the room. They turned on a flashlight. A tall figure stood there, completely still, covered in frost, its eyes black and unblinking. The thing tilted its head and whispered, "You shouldn't be here." The brothers ran into the storm. One survived, the other vanished. Search teams later found the cabin. There were claw marks on the walls, and frozen into the floor were human footprints that ended abruptly. like the person had been lifted straight up. This final story comes from Colorado during a record-breaking snowstorm. A woman named Laura was snowed into her remote home for 3 days. Power went out, phone died, roads vanished. On the third night, she heard something digging outside her walls, scratching, shoveling, breathing. She assumed it was rescue. She shouted for help. The digging stopped. Then she heard a voice from outside the wall. "We know you're awake." More voices joined, whispering, laughing. The scratching moved to her windows, her door, her roof. Snow started pouring inside through cracks. Laura locked herself in the bathroom until morning. When rescue teams arrived, they found something horrifying. The snow around her house was completely smooth. No tracks, no signs of digging. But inside the snow-packed walls, there were hand-shaped hollows pressed inward, as if something had been trying to get inside. Blizzards don't just trap you, they erase the world around you. And when no one can reach you, whatever is out there finally has time to knock. Winter nights have a way of making everything feel smaller. The roads disappear. Sounds get swallowed by snow, and the world feels like it ends just beyond the headlights. People think blizzards are dangerous because of the cold, but that's not what scares me anymore. What scares me is what starts moving when everything else is forced to stop. This happened in late December, somewhere in the northern United States. I won't say exactly where, because after that night I stopped going back. I was driving home just after midnight, coming back from a late shift. The weather forecast said, light snowfall. Nothing serious. That was a lie. Within 20 minutes, the snow became thick, huge flakes slamming into my windshield like static on a broken TV. The road faded into white. Trees turned into dark shapes with no detail. No cars, no lights, no signal. That's when my dashboard lit up. Engine failure. The car slowed, then died. I tried the ignition again. Nothing. The silence after the engine shut off felt wrong. Too heavy, like the storm was listening. I stepped outside and the cold hit me instantly. The wind howled through the trees like something screaming far away. That's when I realized how quiet everything else was. No animals, no distant traffic, just wind and snow. Then I saw a dim light far ahead. The light looked like it was coming from a small structure. Maybe a ranger station or old maintenance building. It was far, at least a 10-minute walk. But I didn't have a choice. As I walked, snow erased my footprints almost instantly. Every time I turned around, it looked like I had just appeared there. Halfway there, I heard footsteps, crunching, slow, perfectly matching my pace. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I turned around. Nothing but snow and darkness. I told myself it was just an echo. Wind, my imagination. I kept walking. The footsteps came back. This time, closer. The structure was an old roadside shelter, the kind built decades ago and forgotten. One small window, one metal door. The light inside flickered weakly. I knocked. No answer. I pushed the door open. Inside, it smelled old. Dust, rust, and something damp. There was a bench, a small heater, and a radio mounted on the wall. The heater was warm. That made no sense. Someone had been here recently. I locked the door behind me. That's when the radio crackled to life. Not music, not voices. Breathing. Slow, deliberate, like someone holding the microphone too close to their mouth. I reached to turn it off, and the breathing stopped. Then came a voice, soft, calm. "You shouldn't have stopped." I froze. The voice came again through the radio. This time it said my name. I didn't tell anyone where I was going that night. I backed away from the radio. That's when I noticed something else. The window. There were handprints slowly forming on the glass. From the outside, one by one, pressing hard, the door rattled. Someone or something was pulling the handle. A voice whispered through the metal. "Open up! You're freezing!" It sounded almost human, almost. I shouted that I had a phone, that I'd call the police. The voice laughed, low, quiet. "You already tried." That's when the heater shut off. The temperature dropped instantly. Frost crawled along the walls like veins. The radio clicked one last time. "We walk when the snow erases the roads." The lights went out. I didn't think. I ran. I burst through the door and into the blizzard. The footsteps were right behind me now, not walking, running. I couldn't see my car anymore. The storm had erased everything. Then I felt something brush my shoulder. Ice cold. I screamed and fell into the snow. The footsteps stopped. I looked up. Someone was standing over me. Tall, too still, covered in snow like it had been there for hours. Its face was wrong, smooth, pale, empty, no breath, no warmth. It leaned down and whispered. Midnight is when we're allowed to leave the storm. I don't remember much after that. I woke up in a hospital. A plow driver found me just before dawn, half buried, barely breathing. They asked where my car was. They asked where I had walked from. When I described the shelter, the officer looked confused. He said it was torn down 30 years ago after several people froze to death there during a blizzard. They were never all found.